"Think you can handle us all?" said the 3 maids hired by the billionaire. He thought he was just hiring help, but these women didn't come to polish his floors. They came to clean up his life. They gave him order. They gave him hope. But when they uncovered the company's darkest secret, everything changed. Now the man who built an empire must choose, protect his fortune, or stand with the people who taught him how to live again. They cleaned his mansion, but can they cleanse his conscience? When compassion takes over power, who really ends up saving who? The fog rolled thick across the New England coast, shrouding Elias Hart's modernist mansion in a ghostly veil. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, the 32-year-old tech billionaire watched darkness fade to grey, his reflection haggard in the glass. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, evidence of another sleepless night. The weight of exhaustion hung on him like a heavy coat. He couldn't shrug off, making even the simplest thoughts feel like wading through molasses. He rubbed his temples, fighting a headache as his phone buzzed. Another tabloid notification. Yesterday's headline still burned. Hart Mansion Secrets Exposed. The leak had been the last straw. He'd fired the entire housekeeping staff on the spot. The betrayal stung worse than the exposure. Someone he'd paid well had sold his privacy for a quick paycheck. "Should have vetted them better," he muttered, pacing past scattered papers and abandoned protein shake bottles. The house was a mess, exactly what the paparazzi would love to see. His grandmother would have been horrified at the state of things. She'd always maintained that a cluttered space meant a cluttered mind. Right now, his mind was a hurricane of worries, deadlines, and regrets. The half-empty coffee mug in his hand was his third of the morning, bitter and lukewarm. Elias dialed a number he'd found through the local church network. Small agencies were easier to background check, less risk. He needed discretion more than efficiency at this point, though both would be nice. "Grace and Glory Cleaning Services," answered a warm voice on the other end. 10 minutes and a brief conversation later, arrangements were made for that very morning. By 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. Through the security camera, he saw 3 women waiting on his doorstep. Not what he'd expected. They looked more like a small business team than house cleaners, professional, alert, and strangely confident, standing before the glass and steel fortress he called home. "Mr. Hart?" The shortest one spoke first, Maribel Cruz, according to her agency profile. She wore practical clothes and a no-nonsense expression that reminded him of his third-grade teacher. "We're from Grace and Glory Cleaning Services. I believe we spoke earlier." He opened the door cautiously, scanning the driveway behind them for any sign of paparazzi. "Come in. Sorry about the—" He gestured vaguely at everything. They followed him to the kitchen, where breakfast dishes still cluttered the counter alongside yesterday's takeout containers. Grace O'Malley, a silver-haired woman with laugh lines around her eyes, studied the space with a nurse's analytical gaze, noting problem areas with quick, practiced glances. The youngest, Asha Patel, carried a tablet and began taking notes, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency, documenting everything she saw. "Think you can handle us all?" Maribel asked, her tone warm but firm. There was something maternal in her stance that reminded him of his sister. The question wasn't about the house, but about him, whether he was ready for their approach to his problems. Elias started, then stopped. The question caught him off guard. Usually he was the one asking that. In boardrooms and investor meetings, he was always the one sizing others up. "I guess we'll find out," he finally managed. "Let's start with basics," Grace said, opening cabinets and peering inside with a clinical gaze. "When was the last time anyone did a proper kitchen inventory? You've got expired condiments from 2021 in here." "I don't remember," he admitted, feeling a flush of embarrassment. For someone who managed billion-dollar systems, his personal life was embarrassingly chaotic. Asha looked up from her tablet, her dark eyes intelligent and assessing. "We'll need access to your office printer for documentation. Everything gets logged. It's our standard practice. Nothing leaves this house without you approving it first." Her voice was soft but precise, each word carefully chosen. Documentation. His tech brain perked up at the word. Structure. Systems. This was language he understood. Checklists, schedules, inventory sheets. Maribel explained, pulling a sample from her bag to show him. "We believe in transparency. Speaking of which," she gestured to a pile of unopened mail on the counter, some envelopes showing important-looking official seals. "That needs sorting. Securely. We don't touch personal correspondence without explicit permission." Elias watched them move through his space, noting how they communicated with quick glances and efficient gestures. They worked like a well-oiled machine, each anticipating the other's movements. Maribel opened the refrigerator and whispered something to Grace, who nodded and made a note. Asha photographed the current state of rooms before any cleaning began. "Your bedroom is priority," Grace declared, returning from upstairs. Her expression was kind but professional. "No wonder you can't sleep. Those blinds let in too much light, and the air quality is terrible. You've got dust build-up that would make anyone's sinuses rebel. We'll fix that. Proper rest is foundational to everything else. I have some medical supplies in there," he said quickly, thinking of Anna's old clinic stuff. The boxes he couldn't bear to part with after her death, though he rarely looked at them anymore. "The drawer by the bed? I noticed." Grace's eyes softened with understanding, a flash of recognition passing between them. "We'll inventory those properly too. Everything stays where you want it. Some things aren't meant to be tidied away, just respected." Throughout the morning, they transformed chaos into order with methodical precision. Maribel tackled the kitchen, creating labeled zones and a meal planning space with magnetic charts on the refrigerator. She hummed quietly as she worked, occasionally asking Elias about his food preferences and allergies. Asha documented everything, her fingers flying across her tablet as she created detailed spreadsheets and cleaning schedules. She was thorough, noting every item's location in a system that made perfect sense even at first glance. Grace disappeared upstairs with bags of fresh linens and blackout curtains, transforming his bedroom into what she called a proper sleep sanctuary. "Mr. Hart?" Maribel called from the pantry, holding up several packages of protein bars. "When was the last time you ate a proper meal? Something that didn't come from a wrapper or delivery box?" He had to think about it, which was answer enough. Yesterday, maybe. The days had started blurring together weeks ago. She shook her head, maternal disapproval radiating from her like warmth. "That won't do. Part of our service is making sure you're taken care of, not just your house. You need fuel, not just caffeine and protein isolate. I'm making you a proper lunch before we leave." By late afternoon, the change was remarkable. The kitchen gleamed, appliances arranged for actual cooking rather than just coffee making. Mail was sorted into organized trays, urgent, business, personal, and recycling. His bedroom actually looked inviting. The sheets changed, the blackout curtains installed, and a small humidifier adding moisture to the dry air. Even the scattered fitness equipment had been assembled and arranged in the home gym, no longer accusatory reminders of neglected self-care. Asha approached with her tablet, her manner respectful but confident. "We've drafted a weekly plan," she said, pulling up a detailed schedule with color coding and clear categories. "But we need to establish house rules first, parameters that work for everyone." "Rules?" Elias frowned, his independence bristling slightly. "In my own house?" "For everyone," Maribel clarified, her tone gentle but unwavering. "Including you. 1-week trial run, see if we're a good fit. We don't just clean spaces, Mr. Hart, we help create sustainable order." Grace added, setting a glass of water before him instead of his reaching for another coffee. "You need sleep, proper meals, and a routine. We're here to help with all of that. The mansion can sparkle, but if you're falling apart, what's the point? Your grandmother wouldn't have wanted that." The mention of his grandmother caught him off guard. He hadn't told them about her, but perhaps they'd seen the photos, her warm smile watching over the living room from silver frames. Elias looked at the plan they'd posted on his smart fridge. Color-coded, detailed, but not overwhelming. It reminded him of his project management software, breaking big problems into solvable pieces. There was something reassuring about seeing his chaotic life transformed into manageable chunks of time and tasks. These women weren't just cleaners, they were problem solvers, each bringing their own expertise to a situation that had spiraled beyond his control. Maribel's organizational skills and nurturing instincts, Grace's healthcare background and gentle authority, Asha's systematic documentation and attention to detail. They worked together like a program he might have designed himself if he'd had the clarity to see his own needs. 1 week? He agreed, surprising himself with how easily the words came. Let's see how it goes. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope that things might actually improve. Maribel smiled, satisfaction warming her eyes. "We'll see you tomorrow at 7, Mr. Hart. Try to get some sleep tonight. The bedroom's ready for it. I've left a simple dinner in the refrigerator with heating instructions. Nothing fancy, just nutritious." As they gathered their things to leave, efficient as they'd been all day, Elias noticed something else had changed. The fog outside had lifted while they worked, sunlight now streaming through the freshly cleaned windows. The world outside looked clearer, more accessible somehow, and for the first time in weeks, he felt like he could actually rest, the crushing weight on his shoulders just a little lighter than before. The afternoon sun was starting to dip when Maribel glanced at her watch. "Have you eaten anything since breakfast, Mr. Hart?" Elias shook his head, still reviewing the contract they'd shown him. His grandmother's signature at the bottom made his chest tight. He remembered her insistence on doing right by people. He just hadn't known how far that extended. "I'll handle dinner," Grace announced, already moving towards the kitchen. Something light but nourishing. While Grace worked, Asha and Maribel hung a large whiteboard on the pantry door. In neat block letters, Asha wrote, "House rules. These seem simple," Elias commented, watching them work. "Simple works," Maribel replied. "Your grandmother understood that. It's why she structured the contract this way." She pulled out another document. "Speaking of which, this is the addendum you initialed this morning with your lawyer." Elias remembered the hasty conference call. He'd been surprised by the scope. Not just cleaning services, but community hours that included training programs and outreach. The billing structure was unusual, too. His grandmother had set up a foundation to match every dollar spent on housekeeping with equal funding for community support. "Tell me more about these wraparound services," he said, settling at the kitchen island as Grace set down a bowl of homemade soup and fresh bread. Maribel's eyes lit up. "We believe in sustainable support. Our workers get childcare vouchers. That's how I can be here while my son Noah is taken care of. We offer ESL classes, legal aid for immigration paperwork." She glanced at Asha, who nodded. "It's about creating stability, not just jobs." The soup was perfect, simple chicken broth with vegetables and tiny pasta shells. Grace placed a cup of chamomile tea beside it. "No more caffeine after 6, she said firmly. "Doctor's orders." "Are you actually a doctor?" Elias asked. "Oncology nurse for 15 years, she replied. "Now I use those skills differently." She was already removing coffee pods and energy drinks from his bedroom mini-fridge. Asha worked quietly in the background, creating a new filing system for the scattered papers on his desk. Each folder got a clear label, and she input everything into a tracking spreadsheet. "Documentation matters," she said when she caught him watching. It's how we prove what works. The evening settled into a gentle rhythm. Maribel programmed his smart home system to dim the lights gradually after 9, matching natural sleep cycles. She also set up breakfast service for the morning. Nothing heavy, just fruit, toast and tea, 6:30 a.m. By 10 o'clock, the house felt different, peaceful. The endless stream of thoughts that usually kept Elias awake had slowed to a manageable trickle. "We'll see you tomorrow," Grace said as they prepared to leave. "The bedroom is sleep-ready. No screens after 11. Elias nodded, too tired to argue. He watched through the security feed as they left, 3 distinct personalities who'd somehow merged into exactly what this space, what he needed. In his bedroom, he found the sheets turned down, white noise machine set to ocean waves, and a glass of water on the nightstand. His phone charger had been moved to the other room. For the first time in weeks, sleep came easily. The digital clock on his nightstand clicked from 11:02 p.m. to 11:03, but he didn't see it. He was already drifting off. When his eyes opened again, sunlight was just beginning to peek through the blackout curtains. The clock read 6:18 a.m., 7 hours of uninterrupted sleep, a small miracle wrapped in his grandmother's foresight and these women's care. The morning light filtered through the windows as Elias stirred at exactly 6:30 a.m. For a moment, he lay still, marveling at how different his body felt after a full night's sleep. No headache, no burning eyes, no familiar tightness in his shoulders that had become his constant companion. Just rest. The sensation was so foreign that he almost didn't recognize it, like meeting an old friend whose face had changed with time. A gentle knock preceded Grace's entrance with a breakfast tray. "Good morning," she said, setting down oatmeal topped with fresh berries and a pot of herbal tea. Steam curled up from the teapot, carrying the soothing scent of chamomile and mint through the room. The berries glistened like jewels against the creamy oatmeal. "Morning," Elias replied, still getting used to the daily rhythm they were establishing. He sat up, running a hand through his disheveled hair. The sheets rustled beneath him, clean and crisp in a way he'd forgotten to appreciate. Grace's eyes caught something in the corner, a medical supply cabinet, partially visible through a cracked door. The metal gleamed in the morning light, revealing stacks of sterile packages and bottles. "Mr. Hart," she began carefully, her nurse's training evident in her tone, "I noticed you have IV tubing and wound dressings stored here. Is everything all right?" Her hands stilled on the breakfast tray, her expression a careful blend of professional concern and genuine care. Elias's spoon paused halfway to his mouth. A drop of oatmeal fell back into the bowl with a tiny splash. "They're from Sarah's clinic," he said quietly. "My sister's project. She wanted healthcare access for everyone, regardless of ability to pay." He set the spoon down with a soft clink against the porcelain. "The clinic's supposed to close next month. Victor, my COO, says it's inefficient." The word inefficient hung in the air, carrying a weight that seemed to bow his shoulders. "Victor Lang?" Grace's voice held a note of recognition. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the edge of the tray. "I've heard of him. Efficiency expert, right? That's one way to put it." Elias stirred his oatmeal absently, creating tiny whirlpools in the bowl. "Sarah left an endowment, but Victor says the returns aren't sustainable." The berries sank into the creamy mixture, red bleeding into white. Grace settled into a nearby chair, her professional demeanor softening. The morning sunlight caught the silver streaks in her hair, turning them almost luminous. "I left nursing because of burnout," she shared. "There was this patient, Jenny, 17, terminal diagnosis. She loved sunflowers and had dreams of becoming a photographer. Her voice grew softer, carried on a wave of memories. I still pray for her family. She met Elias's eyes, something resolute forming in her gaze. But walking away doesn't fix the system. Sometimes the hardest choices are about turning back toward what broke you. I can help with that, Asha said from the doorway, tablet in hand. She stood with quiet confidence, her glasses reflecting the morning light. If you'll let me map your philanthropic spending against actual community needs, data tells stories, Mr. Hart. She tapped her tablet screen. Numbers don't lie, but they need someone to interpret them correctly. By late morning, Maribel had transformed the kitchen whiteboard into a command center. Color-coded sticky notes created a rainbow of tasks and priorities. Her handwriting, neat and decisive, filled the blank spaces. Library clearing. Priority 1, she announced, capping her marker with a satisfying click. Asha, you're on mail triage. I've sorted by urgency. Red tags need immediate attention. She pointed to a pile of envelopes. I've scheduled donation pickups for Thursday and every second week after. The community center can use what we don't need here. Elias watched them work while typing a message to Victor on his phone. Delay clinic closure. Need to review numbers. His thumb hovered over the send button for just a moment before pressing down, a small act of defiance against the current he'd been drifting with for too long. The response came quickly, his phone buzzing with Victor's characteristic promptness. Decision is final. Board approval secured. Don't let emotion cloud business. The words seemed cold on the screen, lacking the human element that now filled the house around him. The day moved swiftly. Books found proper homes on shelves, their spines aligned with care and purpose. Years of unopened mail revealed forgotten subscriptions and opportunities, invitations never answered, connections never made. Dust gave way to polish, and the house began to breathe again, like a patient slowly recovering from a long illness. As evening approached, savory aromas filled the kitchen, roasting chicken, herbs, and something sweet underneath it all. Maribel checked her phone, smiling at a text. The tension in her shoulders eased visibly. Noah's doing homework at Pastor Ruth's center, she explained, setting out plates for roast chicken and colorful salads that looked like gardens on porcelain. He stays there until my shift ends. They have tutors who help with math. He's better at it than I am these days. How old is he? Elias asked, helping to carry dishes to the table. The weight of the serving platter felt good in his hands, purposeful, connected to something real. 10 going on 40. Maribel laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Little crinkles formed at the corners of her eyes. She pulled up FaceTime on her phone, propping it against the salt and pepper shakers. Noah, want to help Mr. Hart learn to make your favorite mac and cheese for next time? A bright-eyed boy appeared on screen, grinning. His missing front tooth gave his smile an endearing quality that made Elias smile back automatically. You got to use 3 kinds of cheese, he declared with the authority of a seasoned chef. Sharp cheddar, mozzarella, and parmesan, and the secret ingredient is love. And garlic powder, Maribel added with a wink, ruffling Noah's hair through the screen in a gesture so natural it seemed to cross the digital divide. They ate together, sharing stories and simple moments. The chicken was perfectly tender, the vegetables crisp. Conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and comfortable silences. The kitchen light created a golden bubble around them, keeping the darkness at bay. By 9:45 p.m., the house had settled into its evening quiet. The dishwasher hummed its lullaby from the kitchen. Soft footsteps padded occasionally down hallways as everyone prepared for rest. Elias sat in his grandmother's old study, a leather-bound ledger open on his lap. The leather was worn smooth at the corners, testament to years of handling. His grandmother's neat handwriting filled the margins. Wealth without purpose is poverty of the soul. He traced the words with his finger, understanding growing in his heart like a seed finally finding light. The medical supplies in his room seemed to carry new weight now. Sarah's vision of healthcare for all, regardless of means. Grace's experience of both heartbreak and healing. Asha's data that could reveal truth behind numbers. Maribel's practical wisdom that turned chaos into order. His grandmother's words that challenged him to see beyond profit. All pieces of a puzzle he was just beginning to see. A picture larger and more meaningful than he had allowed himself to imagine for too long. The morning sun cast long shadows across Elias's home office as Asha ran a standard printer diagnostic test. She'd learned early in her student jobs that office equipment could tell stories about a workplace. The smooth hum of the machine, the way papers stacked, all revealed how people treated shared resources. The test pages emerged crisp and clear. But something else caught her eye on the digital display. A document stuck in the queue from last week. Facilities, vendor Q3 2023.pdf. Her finger hesitated over the cancel button, hovering there as her mind worked through the implications. Ethics or efficiency? Privacy or responsibility? But years of reviewing pay stubs for immigrant workers had taught her to notice patterns, to look for the stories hidden in columns of numbers. The file names were oddly specific. VL Clean Solutions, LLC Sept, and Sunrise Services, Group Cork 2023. Something about the naming convention tugged at her professional instincts. Asha's breath caught as she scanned the numbers, her eyes widening with each line. Janitors at 3 office towers paid $8 per hour through nested contractor arrangements, subcontractors hiring subcontractors, each taking a cut that should have gone to workers. The legal minimum wage was $15.50. The gap wasn't just an accounting error, it was systematic exploitation. "Maribel," she called softly, trying to keep her voice steady despite the churning in her stomach. "Grace, could you come look at something? I think I found something important." They gathered around the printer screen, shoulders touching as they leaned in. Grace's nurse's eyes narrowed at the systematic underpayment, her lips pressing into a thin line. Maribel, who'd seen similar schemes in her church advocacy work with undocumented families, shook her head, a flash of recognition crossing her face. "We document everything," Maribel said firmly, her voice low but resolute. "Screenshots, dates, file paths, every number, every company, name. No accusations without evidence. I've seen too many people lose their cases because they spoke up too soon." "I'll create a secure folder," Asha replied, her fingers already moving across her tablet with practiced precision. "We need to track every shell company involved, map out the connections. This isn't just about one vendor, it's a system." Her graduate school training in data organization was finding purpose beyond academics. At 10 o'clock sharp, Elias initiated a video call with Victor. His COO's face appeared on screen, perfectly groomed despite the early hour, not a hair out of place, his expression carefully neutral. "The clinic closure is proceeding on schedule," Victor said before Elias could speak, taking control of the conversation immediately. "The board appreciates your attention to efficiency. We've already started the inventory of equipment for redistribution." "We need to discuss more than the clinic," Elias countered, sitting straighter in his chair. "I'm reviewing all our contractor arrangements. There are some discrepancies in the payment structures." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes, remaining fixed while his gaze sharpened. "Playing savior doesn't suit you, Elias. These are market realities. Labor costs require management. And frankly, I'm concerned about how much authority you've given these domestic staff. They weren't hired for business consultation." "They have names," Elias said quietly, feeling a slow burn of anger rise in his chest. and they're doing exactly what my grandmother intended, creating a household that reflects our values. Your grandmother's ideas about community obligation were charming but outdated. We have shareholders now. Sentiment is a luxury we can't afford." Victor replied, his voice smooth as polished marble. The call ended with Victor's warning hanging in the air like a storm cloud. During lunch, homemade soup with chunks of fresh vegetables and crusty bread that Maribel had picked up from the local bakery, Grace brought up the clinic again, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "We should see it before they shut it down," she said, eyes distant with memory. "I could assess the equipment, maybe help relocate some resources to other facilities that serve low-income families. There's so much need out there." Elias pushed his spoon through the soup, watching the carrots and potatoes swirl in the broth. "I'm not sure." The clinic reminded him too much of Sarah's final months, of hours spent in sterile rooms hoping for miracles. "Tomorrow morning," Grace suggested gently, reaching across to touch his wrist briefly. "Sometimes you have to witness things firsthand. Photographs don't capture the whole story." He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision. "Friday morning, then. We'll go together." The afternoon found them tackling the 3-car garage, which had become a storage catch-all over the years. Dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight as they sorted, through boxes and furniture. Behind dusty exercise equipment and old furniture, they discovered a stack of crates marked in elegant handwriting, the letters flowing with personality. "Community Wing, Grandmother's Plan." "Look at this," Maribel called out, excitement warming her voice as she lifted out folding tables and industrial food warmers, sturdy enough for regular use. Craft supplies filled another box, quality materials for children's projects, not dollar store leftovers. A third contained children's books and board games, some still in their original packaging. Grace held up a hand-painted wooden sign, its letters flowing and graceful, each brush stroke made with obvious care. "A house is for guests." She ran her fingers over the smooth surface, feeling the intention behind each word. "The East Wing," Elias said suddenly, memory flickering to life. "It's just been sitting empty since—" He trailed off, remembering Sarah's last visits there, how she'd loved the morning light through the tall windows. The silence that followed held all their understanding. It could be beautiful. Maribel mused, her practical mind already reconfiguring the space. A real resource hub for families. Pastor Ruth's been looking for more space for the after-school program. The kids need somewhere safe after the bell rings. They worked until sunset, organizing the garage into keep, donate, and resource hub piles. Muscles ached pleasantly from honest work as they sorted through years of accumulated belongings. Asha created a meticulous inventory, her tablet filling with categories and subcategories. Grace sketched possible floor plans on the back of an old envelope, thinking about flow and function. Maribel called Noah to tell him she'd be home on time, and his excited chatter about a science project involving plant growth filled the garage with warmth and normalcy. At 10:15, Elias sat at his desk, staring at a fresh document printed on heavyweight paper. The audit order would require full transparency from every subcontractor, with clear consequences for wage violations. His pen hovered over the signature line, the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. "After the clinic," he whispered, setting it carefully in his outbox where it would wait for his final decision. Outside his window, the moon silvered the waves below the cliff, turning the water into a sheet of rippling metal, and somewhere in the distance, a lighthouse beam swept steadily through the dark, a rhythm as old as hope itself. The document waited, unsigned but full of promise, while the house settled into its nightly peace. Creaking floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of waves. In the kitchen, tomorrow's breakfast menu was already posted on the refrigerator in Maribel's neat handwriting. 7 a.m., whole grain waffles, fresh fruit, and the beginning of whatever would come next. A simple routine that somehow felt like building a foundation. Friday dawned with a bite in the air that made the autumn leaves crackle. Grace pulled her cardigan closer as she waited by Elias's car at 8:30. He emerged from the house looking more put together than she'd seen all week. Crisp blue shirt, dark jacket, leather shoes that hadn't seen much wear. "Ready?" she asked simply. He nodded, keys jingling in his hand. "Maribel and Asha have the blueprint meeting covered. They're spreading everything out in the dining room as we speak. Asha's got 3 different colored markers for coding spaces." The drive to the clinic took 40 minutes, winding through increasingly modest neighborhoods. Grace noticed Elias's hands tightening on the steering wheel as they turned onto Monroe Street. The Sarah Hart Community Clinic occupied a renovated Victorian, its paint fresh, but its spirit weary. A hand-lettered notice of closure was taped inside the front window. At 9:10, Grace pushed open the familiar door. The waiting room wasn't full. Word of the closure had already spread, but the faces that looked up made her heart catch. "Nurse Grace!" Mr. Chen called out from his usual corner chair. He was finishing his last round of chemo, she knew. His granddaughter Emily sat beside him with a worn paperback. "I didn't know you were coming back," said Maria Rodriguez, bouncing her 4-month-old while her toddler played with worn waiting room toys. Grace remembered helping her through a difficult pregnancy, teaching her about nutrition when formula prices had soared. Jim Wallace, a veteran who'd been coming for wound care, leaned on his cane as he approached. "Place won't be the same without you all." Elias stood very still, watching. These weren't numbers on a spreadsheet anymore. These were stories with voices, with children, with hands that reached out to touch Grace's arm in greeting. The staff did so much more than just medical care, Grace explained quietly as they toured the facility. We knew which patients needed bus passes to make appointments, which ones were choosing between medicine and food. In the break room, a bulletin board held photos of celebrations, birthdays, recovery milestones, staff potlucks. Sarah's face beamed from several of them, her arm around patients and colleagues alike. By 11, back in his car, Elias pulled out his phone and made a note. Research Foundation conversion requirements, independent board structure, sustainable funding model. He glanced at Grace. If I can navigate the corporate politics, this place needs to stay open, under proper protection this time. The mansion was alive with activity when they returned at noon. Maribel and Asha had transformed the dining table into a planning center, with layout sketches and typed lists. We think we can start small but meaningful, Maribel explained, pointing to their phases. Weeknight soup suppers in the East Wing kitchen, weekend homework help in the library space. Once your audit kicks in and we understand, the employment situation better, maybe a job resource center. Asha held up a carefully annotated floor plan. The existing bathroom is ADA compliant, and the separate entrance means good security control. We've listed basic equipment needs and volunteer roles. At 2 o'clock, Elias sat at his desk and signed 2 documents. The first, a comprehensive audit order for all subcontractor relationships with explicit wage verification requirements. The second, a temporary license for the East Wing to be used for community service activities starting immediately. It's not fancy, he said, handing the license to Maribel, but it's legal and it's a start. They gathered again at 4 to finalize details for the next day's pilot program. Pastor Ruth had carefully selected 10 families who could benefit from a quiet place to study and a hot meal. Noah's excited to help, Maribel said, checking her list. He's already picked out books to share with the younger kids. The evening found them all in the kitchen, prep work in full swing. 3 huge stock pots simmered with chicken soup. Asher organized donated school supplies, while Grace inventoried the first aid kit they'd set up. Noah's voice piped through Maribel's phone speaker as they worked. "Mr. Elias, you're on dishes because you're new. Mum says everyone starts with dishes." Elias looked at the growing pile of prep bowls and pots. "Fair enough, but I think I'll need coaching on your mum's standards." "That's easy," Noah said. "If you can see anything on it at all, it's not clean enough, and the drying rack has to be organized by size. I learned that one the hard way." Maribel smiled as she chopped carrots. "He's not wrong. Ready for your first lesson in proper dish protocol?" Elias rolled up his sleeves and reached for the soap. "Teach me everything you know." They worked steadily, the kitchen warm with steam and conversation. Grace added another bay leaf to the soup. Asher sorted flashcards by subject. Outside, the early dark settled over the cliff, but inside, light spilled from every window, and the house felt more awake than it had in years. The Saturday morning fog had lifted by 9 when Pastor Ruth's weathered van pulled into the circular drive. She stepped out first, her silver hair catching the sun, and greeted Maribel with a warm hug. "You've worked miracles already," she said, taking in the neat transformation of the East Wing entrance. A simple welcome sign hung by the door, and through the windows they could see tables set with bright cloths and fresh flowers from the garden. The families emerged from the van slowly, some hesitant, others curious. There was the Martinez family, mother, father, and 3 school-age children clutching backpacks. The Williams sisters with their grandmother, 2 single mums with toddlers, a teenager named Marcus with his younger brother. Inside, the space felt both organized and welcoming. Maribel had posted 3 rules in clear, bold letters. Every person deserves eye contact. No one leaves hungry. We tell the truth. The donation rack stood discreetly in one corner, stocked with clean coats and school supplies. Near the windows, Grace had set up a coloring corner with fresh crayons and paper. The long tables offered space for homework or conversation, and the kitchen smelled of simmering soup. Elias moved through the space wearing a plain baseball cap, trying to remember everyone's names as Maribel made introductions. He'd insisted on working, not just watching. "I'm on kitchen duty today," he explained to the curious looks, heading to the prep counter where cutting boards waited. At 10:30, Noah burst in with the energy only a 10-year-old could muster on a Saturday morning. He spotted Elias struggling with an onion and marched over, hands on his hips. "Mr. Elias, you're holding the knife wrong," he declared. "Mom, can I hire him as my assistant? He needs training." Maribel suppressed a smile. "If Mr. Elias agrees to take direction, I defer to the expert," Elias said solemnly, accepting Noah's detailed instructions on proper onion dicing technique. In a quiet corner, Asher had set up a small desk with a laptop and printer. A simple sign read, "Work questions welcome." She helped Mrs. Martinez review a complicated pay stub from her cleaning job, explaining minimum wage laws in clear, patient Spanish. Later, she showed Marcus how to calculate overtime rates for his weekend warehouse work. The hours flowed easily. Children spread homework across tables, getting help from Grace with math problems. Parents shared coffee and stories. The soup, chicken with rice and vegetables, filled bowls and drew people back for seconds. By 1 o'clock, the space hummed with comfortable energy. 2 little girls taught Elias a clapping game. A grandfather who'd been quiet all morning started telling stories about his years as a carpenter, drawing an interested audience. Noah proudly served soup, wearing an oversized apron. "This is exactly what we needed," Pastor Ruth said quietly to Maribel, watching a teenage girl help a younger child sound out words. A place between church and services, just somewhere to be together with dignity. At 2, as families began gathering their things, there were hugs and thank yous. Children clutched drawings to take home. Parents left with containers of extra soup, information sheets from Asha, and promises to return. Same time next week? Pastor Ruth suggested, helping stack chairs. While you sort out the bigger picture. Maribel looked at Elias, who nodded. Same time next week, he confirmed. And maybe by then we'll have news about the clinic too. After the last van departed, Elias retreated to his office. His fingers moved steadily over the keyboard as he composed 2 important emails. The first went to his board of directors, formally announcing the subcontractor audit and requesting an emergency session to discuss reinstating and expanding the clinic's funding. The second went to his lawyers, outlining the foundation structure he envisioned: independent, protected, sustainable. By 6, the East Wing was reset for next week. Dishes were done, and everyone gathered in the main kitchen for a simple dinner of leftover soup and fresh bread. Grace had made apple crisp for dessert. The conversation flowed easily now, punctuated by laughter as Noah demonstrated his professional chef's taste-testing technique. I think Sarah would have loved today, Grace said softly, and for the first time, the mention of his sister's name didn't make Elias flinch. She would have been right in the middle of it all, he agreed. Probably running a science experiment table or something. They lingered over dessert, sharing stories and ideas. Asha had a list of local lawyers willing to help with workers' rights cases. Maribel was already planning next week's menu. Grace mentioned teaching basic health monitoring for families between clinic visits. The evening wound down naturally. Noah fell asleep on the couch while the adults cleaned up. Pastor Ruth came back to collect him and Maribel, leaving with a warm, "God bless this work," that felt more like a celebration than a prayer. At 10 o'clock, right on schedule, the last lights went out across the mansion. No one needed to announce quiet hours anymore. The rhythm had already become natural, like the sound of waves on the cliff below, or the steady breath of hope rising. Sunday dawned with gentle fog rolling off the ocean. Asha dressed carefully in a pressed blouse and skirt, checking her notebook one last time before heading to Pastor Ruth's church. She wanted to learn more about the families they'd serve, to understand their needs beyond just Saturday soup and homework help. In the kitchen, Maribel and Grace tackled their deep cleaning mission with practiced efficiency. "These copper pots haven't seen proper polish in years," Grace noted, working at stubborn tarnish spots. "Good thing we bought industrial-strength cleaner," Maribel replied, updating their supply spreadsheet. "And look what I found in the back of this cabinet, a professional-grade coffee machine, still in the box." Meanwhile, Elias's running shoes crunched along the cliff path. The morning air was sharp and clean in his lungs. He'd brought his grandmother's leather-bound notebook, stopping at a weathered bench to read her elegant script. "Wealth without purpose is poverty of the soul. Put people first, always." He traced her words with his finger. She'd built this place not as a fortress, but as a beacon. His sister Sarah had understood that too, with her dreams for the clinic. Now, finally, he was beginning to see it clearly. Back at the mansion by 11, everyone gathered for a simple brunch of quiche and fruit salad. Asha shared what she'd learned at church. 3 families need winter coats, she reported. And Mrs. Chen's grandson wants to study engineering but needs SAT prep. Maribel spread out a color-coded calendar on the table. "I've mapped out a weekly schedule," she explained. "We need structure to make this sustainable." They reviewed each day's focus: Mondays for sorting donations and organizing resources, Tuesdays dedicated to homework help and tutoring, Wednesdays for audit work and compliance reviews, Thursdays to plan the clinic reopening, Fridays for community suppers, Saturdays for restocking and repairs, Sundays reserved for worship and rest. "This gives us clear boundaries," Grace noted approvingly. And time to do things right. After brunch, Elias settled in his office to draft the public statement. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he began typing. For years, this house has stood apart from its community. That changes now. Thanks to the women who put this house in order, who reminded me what true wealth means. We are opening our doors and our books. A full audit of all contracts and payments will ensure every worker receives what they are legally and morally owed, including back pay for any underpayments found. He paused, then added, "This is not charity. This is justice, community, and purpose aligned. My grandmother understood this. My sister fought for this. Now we move forward together." At 6 o'clock, they gathered in the kitchen for their team huddle. Grace brought up security concerns first. "We need a plan for when reporters start calling. And drop-in visitors." Maribel added, "We can't have people just wandering up to the house." They established clear signals. A blue porch light meant media presence, yellow for unexpected visitors. 3 short rings on their internal phones would mean need backup. 2 long rings, all clear. All inquiries go through the foundation office. Elias decided. No personal statements, no individual interviews. Asha made careful notes. "I'll draft response templates tomorrow, standard language we all use." By 8:30 they were winding down for the night. Grace packed her nursing bag for tomorrow's first aid workshop. Maribel reviewed the donation sorting checklist while helping Noah with his science homework via video call. Asha organized her files for Wednesday's audit meeting. In his bedroom, Elias found a fresh notepad by his pillow. Grace's gentle reminder to log his sleep schedule. He smiled, writing the date and time. The night settled over the mansion like a soft blanket. No phones rang, no cameras flashed. Just the steady rhythm of waves below and the quiet certainty that tomorrow would bring its own challenges and victories. The house stood peaceful against the darkness, waiting for Monday's pale light. The fog crept in from the sea, carrying the promise of dawn. Inside, 4 people slept soundly, each dreaming of the work ahead. The house held their dreams safe, its windows glowing faintly in the mist like beacons of hope. Monday dawned with a flurry of activity. At precisely 8 o'clock, Elias's email pinged with confirmation from Anderson and Myers Accounting. Audit directive received. Proceeding with subcontractor review effective immediately. He allowed himself a small smile as he read the message twice, the blue glow of his laptop illuminating his face in the still dim office. This was the first tangible step toward making things right. By 9:30, Asha had transformed the East Wing's corner desk into an impromptu worker assistance station. Her meticulous nature showed in the carefully arranged folders, color-coded paperwork, and a small potted plant she'd brought to make the space more welcoming. A hand-lettered sign read, "Workers' Rights Support," in both English and Spanish. By 10 o'clock, 3 janitors from the office towers had already arrived, manila envelopes clutched in nervous hands, uncertainty written across their tired faces. "Please, sit down," Asha said warmly to the first visitor, Mr. Rodriguez, gesturing to the padded chair she'd brought from the kitchen. "Would you like some water or coffee before we begin?" He shook his head and spread out wrinkled pay stubs dated from March through August, the corners dog-eared from being handled repeatedly. The numbers told a stark story. $8.25 per hour, well below minimum wage, routed through a company called Stellar Services LLC. Asha's fingers hovered over the documents, her brow furrowed as she mentally calculated the discrepancy. The second worker, Mrs. Kim, a petite woman with calloused hands and kind eyes, brought similar documentation showing $8.50 hourly. Her voice trembled slightly as she explained how she'd been working double shifts to support her elderly mother. Mr. Thompson's stubs listed just $8.75, all channeled through shell companies with different names, but the same post office box. His work boots were worn thin, and he kept glancing at the door as if expecting to be caught. "We'll document everything," Asha assured them, her voice steady and confident as she carefully scanned each stub. "The audit team will calculate all back pay owed, down to the last penny. What happened to you was wrong, and we're going to make it right." She looked each worker in the eye as she spoke, making sure they understood they weren't alone anymore. In the kitchen area, Maribel coordinated with local churches about winter coat donations, her phone tucked between ear and shoulder as she simultaneously arranged mugs on a tray. She created a detailed spreadsheet tracking sizes, ages, and specific needs, adding notes about allergies and fabric preferences. "We need at least 15 children's coats," she told Pastor Ruth over the phone, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard. "And maybe 10 adult ones. Some of these families are walking nearly a mile in the morning chill to reach the bus stop." Sunlight streamed through the freshly cleaned windows, casting warm patches across the wooden floor where Maribel had arranged comfortable seating areas with donated cushions and throws. Each space felt intentional, designed to welcome, rather than intimidate. In the adjacent space, Grace set up a basic first aid station with the practiced efficiency of someone who had organized medical supplies countless times before. She arranged Band-Aids, gauze, and antiseptic wipes in clear plastic bins, labeling each one in large print. A blood pressure cuff and basic thermometer sat ready on a clean white cloth, though she posted clear signs. "Minor first aid only, not a medical clinic." Her gentle movements betrayed her nursing background, methodical, precise, with no wasted motion. "Just basics until we get the real clinic running again," she explained to Maribel, adjusting the height of a small examination table she'd found in storage. "But at least we can help with small things, splinters, minor cuts, checking blood pressure for those who can't afford regular doctor visits." Her eyes reflected both the heartache of what had been lost and the hope of what might be rebuilt. At noon, Elias's phone buzzed while he reviewed budget allocations for the community hub. Victor's name flashed on the screen, causing his stomach to tighten instinctively. Taking a deep breath, he answered and put it on speaker. "This community center concept is a massive brand risk." Victor's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp and cold as winter ice. "These people could sue. They could get hurt on the property. The media will twist this into a PR nightmare. Have you even considered the liability implications?" "These people," Elias repeated slowly, emphasizing each syllable as he gazed out the window at families already gathering near the east entrance, "are our neighbors and our workers." His knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of his desk. "Don't be naive. Cancel the hub. Close up the east wing. We can do a nice annual charity gala instead. Controlled, professional. Photographers, champagne, big novelty checks, the works. Much better optics." Victor's voice held that familiar, condescending tone that once made Elias doubt himself. "No." Elias's voice was firm, unwavering. "We're doing this, Victor. The right way. With dignity and respect, not photo ops. You're making a mistake that could cost millions." The threat hung in the air between them. "The only mistake was letting you turn this company into something my grandmother would be ashamed of." Elias ended the call and sat in silence for a moment, feeling both shaken and strangely liberated by the confrontation. By 3:00, Maribel had finished a new sign for the office, her handwriting neat and bold. In clear letters, she wrote, "House Rules, Boardroom Edition. Ask and use real names, look up from screens when others speak. No decisions without hearing from those affected." She mounted it next to the video conference monitor where Elias held most meetings, stepping back to make sure it was perfectly straight. "Simple enough?" she asked when Elias entered the room, her eyes hopeful but ready for critique. "Perfect," Elias replied, genuinely impressed. Direct and human. Exactly what we need. He studied the sign thoughtfully, realizing how such simple guidelines could transform their entire approach to decision-making. The afternoon mellowed into evening, golden light softening the edges of the day. At 5:30, 6 families gathered around the long tables in the east wing, their chatter filling the space with a warmth the mansion hadn't felt in years. Steam rose from pots of chicken noodle soup that Maribel had simmered all afternoon, the rich aroma mingling with fresh baked bread that filled wicker bread baskets. Children's laughter echoed down hallways that had been silent for too long. Noah sat at his favorite corner table, math textbook open beside his soup bowl, his pencil tapping rhythmically against the paper as he concentrated. Elias stopped to check on him, drawn by the boy's intense focus that reminded him of himself at that age. "These fractions are tricky," Noah admitted, erasing an answer with such vigor that the paper crinkled. His forehead wrinkled in concentration. "Want help?" Elias offered, sliding into the chair beside him. "I used to be pretty good at math, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth." The joke earned him a small smile from Noah. They worked through several problems together, Elias patiently explaining concepts rather than just giving answers. The boy's quick mind impressed him. Before they finished, Noah looked up with serious eyes that seemed too wise for his years. "Mr. Elias, is it true the clinic's coming back? Mom said maybe, but she gets that look when she doesn't want me to get my hopes up. You know the look." Elias met the boy's hopeful gaze, suddenly aware of the weight his answer carried. "Yes," he said firmly, without hesitation. "It's coming back. We'll do it right this time. Stable funding, proper staffing. It'll take some time, but we'll make it happen." As he spoke the words, he silently reaffirmed his commitment to making them true. Noah's smile lit up his whole face, revealing a missing front tooth. "Promise?" "Promise." Elias felt something shift inside him at that simple exchange, the responsibility of a promise made to a child who had likely seen too many broken ones already. The evening wound down peacefully, families departing with leftover bread tucked into napkins and dates for the next gathering marked on calendars. By 9:45, Elias sat at his desk crafting tomorrow's press statement, the lamp casting a warm circle around his workspace. He chose his words carefully, focusing on accountability and community, rather than charity or image. When finished, he slipped the pages into his jacket pocket and hung it by the door, ready for morning, his grandmother's photo watching approvingly from his desk. The mansion settled into its nighttime quiet, creaking occasionally as old houses do. In the east wing, empty soup pots soaked in sinks. Homework papers were stacked neatly. The first aid station stood ready for tomorrow's visitors, and on Asher's desk, carefully organized files held the first pieces of evidence, pay stubs, contracts, and worker testimonies, proof that change was possible, one document at a time. The foundation of justice was being built, not of grand gestures, but of these small, methodical acts of doing what was right. The morning light bathed the mansion's east lawn in a gentle glow as the local Channel 5 news van pulled up at 9 o'clock sharp. Sarah Chen, a reporter known for her community features, stepped out with a small crew of 2. "We're hoping to capture the authentic spirit of what you're doing here," Sarah explained, adjusting her navy blazer. "No sensationalism, just honest community work." Maribel welcomed them with coffee in paper cups, while Grace helped the cameraman find good angles that respected visitors' privacy. Asher organized neat stacks of community program schedules on bright yellow paper. "The lighting in the East Wing is perfect," the cameraman noted, panning across the long tables where Homework Club would meet later. "Really shows the warmth of the space." At 11 o'clock, they moved outside for Elias's statement. He stood near the garden path, the ocean a calming presence behind him. For once he wore no tie, just a simple blue button-down shirt. "What's happening here isn't about me," Elias began, his voice steady. "It's about Maribel Cruz, Grace O'Malley, and Asha Patel. 3 remarkable women who reminded me what this house was meant to be. They've created something beautiful here, a space where everyone is welcomed by name, where no one leaves hungry, where truth matters." He paused, then continued. "Today I'm announcing 2 initiatives. First, a complete audit of all our subcontractor payments, with full back pay for any underpayments found. Second, we're committing funds to reopen the community clinic, with proper staffing and sustainable support." Sarah asked thoughtful follow-up questions about community impact. The segment wrapped by noon, feeling honest and hopeful. At 1:15 in the afternoon, the piece went live on Channel 5's website. Comments began flooding in, mostly positive at first. "Finally, some good news. This is what wealth should do. Remember when that clinic helped my mum? So glad it's coming back." But at 1:30 everything shifted. A blog post appeared on Truth Watch, titled "Billionaire Keeps Illegal Workers at Home." The anonymous writer had sneaked grainy photos through the hedges, catching glimpses of families at the soup dinner. The post twisted everything, claiming the house was running an underground employment ring and harboring undocumented workers. By 2 o'clock, toxic comments swamped every platform. "Raid the mansion. Check their papers. Lock them all up." Asha sat at her desk, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled up her visa documentation webpage. Everything was in order. Her student visa, her work authorization, all current. But fear knotted in her stomach anyway. She remembered her mother's warnings about staying small, staying safe. Maribel found Pastor Ruth in the kitchen, and they sat down with notepads. "We need to respond," Maribel said firmly, "but without feeding the frenzy." They crafted careful words. "The Heart House Community Program operates with full transparency, welcoming all neighbors during posted hours. Our volunteers are properly documented. We maintain sign-in logs and follow all regulations. We remain committed to serving our community with dignity and respect." Grace made tea for everyone, her nurse's instincts kicking in as she noticed the tension in shoulders, the worried glances at phones. "We've done nothing wrong," she reminded them. "We've helped people. That matters more than anonymous hate." By late afternoon, the trio gathered in the library to plan. "We keep Wednesday's homework club," Maribel insisted, "but we add sign-in sheets, post our hours clearly, make sure every volunteer has an ID badge visible." "Agreed," said Grace. "We won't hide, but we'll be careful." Asha nodded, her voice finding strength. "I'll create a proper check-in process. Professional, organized, everything documented." They worked steadily through the early evening. Grace laminated bright hours of operation signs for each entrance. Maribel updated the volunteer database and printed fresh ID badges. Asha created detailed sign-in forms with space for emergency contacts. At 7:30, Noah arrived with Pastor Ruth for his usual evening homework time. Seeing the worry lines on his mother's face, he hugged her extra tight. "Is everything okay, Mum?" he asked. Maribel smiled, running a hand over his hair. "Yes, mijo. Sometimes doing good work means facing some hard days, but we keep going." At 8 o'clock, they did a final walkthrough. ID badges hung ready by the volunteer sign-in station. Hours were posted clearly. Homework club, Wednesdays 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. "Remember everyone," Maribel called out. "Homework club tomorrow. Regular hours, regular routine. We're doing good work here." They nodded, gathering their things for the night. The mansion settled into evening quiet, but sleep would come uneasily. They all knew dawn would arrive grey and steady, bringing whatever challenges tomorrow held. Wednesday morning brought a steady stream of activity to the Hart mansion. By 10 o'clock, the homework club was running like clockwork, with students spread across the East Wing's tables. The sound of pencils scratching paper mixed with quiet conversations about math problems and history dates. In her makeshift office corner, Asha sat with Maria and James, 2 janitors from the office towers. She spread their wrinkled pay stubs across the desk, pointing to specific numbers with a gentle touch. "See here," she explained, tapping a figure. "The minimum wage is $15 per hour, but they're paying you through this shell. Company at only $11.50. She made careful notes, her handwriting precise and clear. Maria twisted her hands in her lap. "I knew something wasn't right, but you needed the job." Asha finished softly. "I understand. Would you be willing to make a formal statement? It would help ensure everyone gets proper back pay." Both workers nodded, and Asha pulled out official forms. "Take your time reading everything. I'll record only what you're comfortable sharing." At 1 o'clock sharp, Elias settled into his office chair for the board video meeting. The new House Rules Boardroom Edition sign was clearly visible behind him. As faces populated the screen, he took a deep breath. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began. "Before we discuss the audit, I'd like to know everyone's real names, not just titles, and please look up from your phones and tablets. This matters." Victor's face tightened on screen. "Elias, this performative community spirit isn't performative, Victor." Elias cut in firmly. "We're discussing real people's livelihoods. I want full transparency on all subcontractor arrangements, every shell company, every payment structure." "That's highly irregular," Victor protested. "So is paying below minimum wage." Elias replied evenly. "We're doing this right, Victor. No more shadows." The tension crackled through the video feed. Other board members shifted uncomfortably, but several nodded in agreement with Elias. By 4 o'clock, Grace found Elias still at his desk, reviewing audit preliminaries. She knocked softly on the door frame. "Tomorrow morning," she said, "you should visit the clinic again. Meet the staff properly, hear from patients. It'll mean more than any press release." Elias looked up, considering. "You're right. Before we make the formal pledge, I need to understand exactly what we're promising to support." They sat together, planning the visit. Grace pulled out her old staff contact list. "Dr. Chen still runs the diabetes program. He'd love to show you the impact data. And Mrs. Rodriguez comes for her weekly checkup at 9. She's been bringing her family there for 20 years. We'll do a small ribbon ceremony tomorrow evening," Elias decided. "Just neighbors, local paper. Something quiet to recognize the volunteers." Grace smiled. "Perfect. Community first, headlines second." The house filled with warm cooking smells as evening approached. By 6:30, everyone gathered around the kitchen table, bowls of steaming chili and fresh cornbread filling the air with spice and comfort. Noah solemnly approached Elias, holding something behind his back. "Mr. Hart," he announced with exaggerated formality. "As official kitchen inspector, I have an award to present." He handed over a slightly crumpled index card, decorated with wobbly markers. In careful 10-year-old handwriting, it proclaimed, "Line Cook of the Week, awarded to Elias Hart for only burning the toast twice." Elias stared at the card for a moment. Then, something remarkable happened. He laughed, not a polite chuckle or a brief smile, but real laughter that crinkled his eyes and shook his shoulders. It was a sound the mansion hadn't heard in months. "This," he declared, still grinning, "is going on my office wall, right next to my tech patents." "Really?" Noah beamed. "Absolutely. It's my first cooking award. Very prestigious." The kitchen filled with warmth that had nothing to do with the stove. Maribel caught Grace's eye and smiled. Another small victory, another step toward healing. As they finished dinner, conversation turned to tomorrow's plans. The ribbon ceremony would be simple. Just scissors, a few words of thanks, cookies from the church ladies. No fancy speeches or big media circus, just neighbors celebrating neighbors. Tomorrow would be a big day. Ordinary good work, made a little brighter. Thursday morning dawned clear and crisp, with a gentle breeze rustling through the trees and the promise of autumn in the air. At 9 o'clock, Elias and Grace pulled into the clinic's modest parking lot, the gravel crunching beneath the tires of his sedan. The familiar sight of the one-story building with its fading blue trim and slightly crooked sign brought a wave of bittersweet memories washing over Grace. She took a deep breath, steadying herself against the tide of emotions. Inside, the waiting room buzzed with quiet activity, the soft rustle of magazines being flipped through, hushed conversations, and the gentle click of the receptionist's keyboard. Children's drawings decorated one wall, their bright colors standing out against the faded beige paint. Dr. Chen looked up from his clipboard, his face brightening at the sight of Grace, crow's feet deepening around his kind eyes. "Nurse Grace, and Mr. Hart, welcome," he said, extending his hand warmly. "I can't tell you how much it means to everyone that you're both here today." An elderly woman in a floral blouse with pearl buttons struggled to her feet from a worn waiting room chair. She reached out with weathered hands to touch Grace's arm, her fingers trembling slightly. "Me Angel," Rosa whispered, her eyes misting behind wire-rimmed glasses. "You helped my Miguel through his last treatments. You made his final days bearable." "Rosa." Grace smiled warmly, clasping her hand between both of her own. "How are you doing these days? Is that arthritis still giving you trouble?" "Better now that we know the clinic might stay open. The pain is nothing compared to the worry we all felt." Rosa turned to Elias, her gaze direct and unwavering. "This place, it's not just medical care, it's family. When you have nobody else, the people here remember your name. They ask about your grandchildren. They care." Throughout the morning, a steady stream of patients shared their stories, each one touching Elias's heart in ways he hadn't expected. In exam room 2, Sarah, a young mother with dark circles under her eyes and twins in a double, stroller, explained how the clinic's flexible hours meant she could get prenatal care without losing her cashier job at the local supermarket. Her twins, now healthy 3-year-olds with matching pigtails, colored quietly in the corner. In the hallway, Marcus, a veteran with a cane and military posture despite his limp, spoke about the dignity of being treated as a person, not a number. "At the VA, I'm case file 47392, he said, leaning on his cane. "Here, I'm Marcus who likes baseball and struggles with his blood pressure meds. That matters more than folks might think." By the water cooler, Jenny, a woman with worry lines etched into her forehead, adjusted her oversized sweater and admitted, "The medication assistance program saved my life." Her teenage daughter stood beside her, nodding solemnly, her hand protectively holding her mother's elbow. "Insulin isn't cheap, even with insurance. Without this place, I'd have had to choose between my medicine and keeping our electricity on." In the cramped break room that smelled of coffee and disinfectant, Elias met with the staff. They crowded around a small table with mismatched chairs, hope and anxiety mingling in their expressions. Dr. Chen, with reading glasses perched on his nose, showed Elias decade-long statistics on diabetes management, preventive care success rates, and community health indicators. The pages were worn at the corners from being handled so often, proof of lives changed, emergencies averted, and care delivered despite dwindling resources. "I promise you," Elias said, his voice firm and clear as he stood before them, feeling the weight of their expectations. "This clinic will stay open. We'll create a new foundation charter that protects its mission for generations to come. Every current staff member who wants to stay will have a place here. No more uncertainty, No more wondering if next month will be your last. This is my commitment to you." The relief in the room was palpable, like a physical wave washing over everyone present. Maria, the front desk coordinator for 15 years, wiped away tears with the sleeve of her cardigan. The young medical assistant, barely out of training, let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. Back at the mansion by noon, golden sunlight streaming through the tall windows, Elias found an urgent email from the audit firm waiting in his inbox. His stomach tightened as he scanned the contents. Their preliminary findings confirmed systematic underpayment at 3 subcontractors: Clean Right Services, Valley Maintenance, and Blue Star Facilities. The numbers were damning. Hundreds of workers paid below legal minimums through a maze of shell companies designed to obscure responsibility. Some employees had been cheated out of thousands in rightful wages, their poverty weaponized against them through threats of deportation or job loss. Elias's reply was immediate and direct, his fingers striking the keyboard with purpose. Process back pay for all affected workers as soon as amounts are confirmed. No delays, no excuses. Include interest where applicable. I want personal confirmation when this is done. The afternoon hummed with preparation for the evening's celebration. In the East Wing, Maribel and Noah arranged wildflowers in mason jars wrapped with twine, transforming simple vessels into centerpieces full of charm. Noah's tongue poked out between his teeth as he concentrated on tying the perfect bow. Asha meticulously set up a simple display of community photos on a bulletin board, each one labeled with the name and story of the person pictured. The smell of Pastor Ruth's famous sugar cookies, crisp at the edges and soft in the center, wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the scent of coffee brewing in large urns. At 5 o'clock, as the setting sun cast long shadows across the grounds, neighbors began arriving at the East Wing entrance. They came carrying potluck dishes, some with children in tow, others with elderly relatives leaning on their arms. Someone brought a guitar, and soft music filled the air, creating a backdrop for the gentle murmur of conversation and occasional bursts of laughter. The local paper's photographer, Jenny Chen, moved through the crowd unobtrusively, capturing candid shots of children doing homework at the new tables, volunteers sorting donations of warm clothes for the coming winter, and Grace showing off the first aid station with professional pride in her eyes. Elias stepped forward, looking more relaxed than anyone had seen him, his tie loosened and a genuine smile softening his features. "This isn't my achievement," he said, gesturing to the transformed space with its freshly painted walls and comfortable furniture. "Everything good happening here comes from 3 remarkable women who reminded me what matters most in this world. Maribel, Grace, and Asha. They put this house in order, in every way that counts. They showed me that wealth without purpose is empty, and that true legacy isn't measured in dollars, but in lives improved." Applause rippled through the room, warm and genuine. Noah, beaming with pride, presented a hand-drawn official community kitchen sign decorated with colorful stars and careful lettering. Pastor Ruth, her silver hair glowing in the soft light, blessed the space with a simple prayer about neighbors helping neighbors and finding strength in community bonds. The peak moment stretched sweet and golden, steam rising from soup pots filled with homemade minestrone and chicken noodle, children's laughter mixing with guitar chords, elderly Mrs. Thompson sitting in a rocking chair, teaching Elias to knit while telling stories about his grandmother's kindness to her family decades ago. The mansion felt truly alive, each corner filled with the warmth of genuine community, the walls that had witnessed decades of isolation now echoing with connection. As 8:30 approached, guests began gathering coats and exchanging hugs, promising to return for next week's programs. The trio started their usual evening routine, wiping down tables with lemon-scented cleaner, storing leftovers in labeled containers, checking the sign-in logs one last time to ensure they had accurate attendance figures. Then came the sound of vehicles on the gravel drive, the distinctive crunch different from departing guests. Through the windows, they saw the flash of red and blue lights cutting through the evening darkness. 2 police cruisers rolled to a stop, their headlights illuminating the building's facade in harsh white light. Grace set down her cleaning cloth, her fingers suddenly still. Maribel's hands paused on the soup pot she was covering, a plastic lid suspended in mid-air. Asha stood perfectly straight, her visitor log clutched to her chest, her eyes wide but determined. Heavy footsteps approached the entrance, boots on gravel, then concrete. A sharp knock echoed through the east wing, cutting through the sudden silence. The trio locked eyes across the room, steady despite the fear blooming in their chests. In that silent moment, they drew strength from each other, and the truth they knew deep in their bones. They had done nothing wrong. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. The knock came again, more insistent this time, the sound reverberating through the room like a thunderclap. The knock echoed again through the east wing, sharper this time, more insistent. Elias moved to answer it, his shoulders tensing with each step, but Maribel touched his arm gently, her warm fingers steady against his sleeve. "Together," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting both determination and calm. The simple word carried weight between them, a reminder that no one stood alone in this house. 2 officers stood at the door, faces impassive under the porch light, warrant papers held firmly in hand. The official document caught the light, its government seal gleaming ominously. "Good evening," the taller one said, his voice professionally neutral as he introduced himself as Detective Morris. His badge winked in the hallway light as he continued. "We need to conduct a search based on anonymous tips regarding potential criminal activity." His partner nodded silently, hand resting near her utility belt. "Of course," Elias replied, maintaining his composure despite the hammering in his chest. He stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please come in." The careful politeness in his voice masked the worry swimming in his stomach. The officers entered with measured steps, their heavy boots echoing against the hardwood floors. Their flashlights cut sharp white beams through the community space, illuminating the worn but clean furniture, the children's artwork taped to walls, the neatly organized resource pamphlets. Within minutes, headlights swept across the windows as Pastor Ruth's familiar minivan pulled into the driveway. She entered without fanfare, her grey hair neatly pinned back, walking in with quiet authority. Her presence brought an immediate calm to the tense atmosphere, like a cool breeze on a sweltering day. "I'm the program coordinator through First Methodist," she explained, her weathered hands pulling out a folder of documentation from her sensible canvas bag. Her voice carried decades of gentle command as she added, "Everything here is properly registered and supervised through our outreach ministry." She spread the papers on the hall table with practiced efficiency. Detective Morris nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the papers while his partner began a methodical search, moving with practiced efficiency. They worked their way through the east wing systematically, opening closet doors and shining lights inside, examining the donation sorting area with its neatly labeled bins, running fingers along the edges of the homework tables where children had sat just hours before, their pencil marks still visible on the scratch paper. Asha stepped forward, her posture perfectly straight, holding a clear plastic folder organized with color-coded tabs. "Here are my visa documents and work authorization," she said steadily, though her fingers clutched the plastic a little too tightly. "And these are our program credentials through the church partnership." Her hands trembled slightly, betraying her careful composure, but her voice remained firm and clear. She met the detective's eyes directly, refusing to look away despite the fear fluttering in her chest. Maribel opened the thick volunteer coordination binder on the coffee table, its pages neatly tabbed and highlighted. "Every visitor signs in and out," she explained, her finger tracing down the rows of neat handwriting. "We track all donations, activities, and participants with timestamps and signatures." She turned several pages, revealing more meticulous records. "Here are the approved weekly schedules and safety protocols, signed off by the church board and community liaison." The pride in her organization showed in the careful way she handled each page. In the first aid corner, with its spotless counter and locked cabinet, Grace walked the officers through the basic supplies, her nurse's efficiency evident in her precise movements. "Band-aids, ice packs, blood pressure cuff for screening only," she detailed, opening drawers one by one. "Non-prescription pain relievers with log sheets for any distribution. No medical procedures are performed here, not even simple ones." Her steady hands gestured toward a laminated poster. "If someone needs actual care, we follow this referral protocol to get them to proper facilities. Everything's documented." The search continued for hours, the officers thorough but professional in their movements. Every drawer was opened, every cabinet inspected, every room examined with methodical care. They documented everything on clipboards, took photographs of the space, and interviewed each staff member separately in the small meeting room. Pastor Ruth stayed close throughout the process, moving between groups, her quiet presence a living reminder of the program's legitimacy and purpose. She occasionally rested a reassuring hand on someone's shoulder or offered a cup of tea from the kitchen. At midnight, the grandfather clock's chimes echoing through the hushed house, Detective Morris closed his notebook with a definitive snap. "We're concluding our search for now," he announced to the tired group gathered in the main room. "No arrests tonight, but I want to be clear that the investigation remains open." He tucked his pen into his shirt pocket. "We may have additional questions in the coming days." As the police cars pulled away, their red tail lights disappearing down the tree-lined drive, exhaustion settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Maribel sank onto the couch. Asha leaned against the door frame, and Grace rubbed her eyes. Elias remained standing, watching the empty driveway. But the night wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. At 12:15, Elias's phone buzzed with an urgent tone. News alerts illuminated his screen, casting a blue glow across his tired face. With growing disbelief, he watched as Victor Lang appeared on late-night television, his expression a perfect mask of corporate concern. "As COO, I worry that Elias is being misled by inexperienced idealists," he said smoothly, his tailored suit impeccable even at this late hour. "His grandmother's legacy deserves better than becoming a community liability or a drain on company resources." The practiced sincerity in his voice made Elias's stomach clench. Asha's sharp intake of breath drew everyone's attention away from Elias's screen. She stared at her own phone, her face draining of color until it appeared ghostly in the dim light. "My visa status," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's been flagged for review." Her hands shook visibly now, as she turned her phone to show them the notification that had just appeared on her immigration portal. "This could take months to resolve, and I can't work during review periods." Fear flickered behind her eyes, raw and real. Before anyone could respond properly, Grace's phone chimed with the distinctive tone she used for professional contacts. Frowning, she tapped her screen and logged into her nursing license portal, only to find an anonymous complaint filed against her, the red flag icon glaring accusingly. The allegations were vague but threatening, implications of practicing without proper supervision and operating outside her scope. "This could trigger a board review," she said quietly, her professional confidence momentarily shaken. At 1:00, as they gathered in worried conference, Maribel's phone rang with a shrill tone that made everyone jump. She answered with a cautious, "Hello?" but was met with a recorded message. She immediately put it on speaker, a formal voicemail from Child Protective Services about conducting a wellness check on Noah, citing an anonymous concern about his living conditions. Her face hardened into a mask of controlled anger, but her voice remained steady as she played it again for the group, her finger hovering over the screen with controlled pressure. They gathered around the kitchen island, drawn together like survivors in a storm, the mounting attacks pushing them closer rather than breaking them apart. Mugs of untouched tea cooled between their hands. The clock read 1:30, its hands seeming to move too quickly and too slowly all at once, when Elias finally spoke into the heavy silence. "This is coordinated," he said quietly, his business-trained mind piecing together the pattern. "Victor's trying to shut us down by targeting each of us individually, by any means necessary." His fingers tapped against the countertop, a nervous rhythm that betrayed his outward calm. "We have documentation for everything," Asha reminded them, her academic precision showing through her fatigue as she straightened in her chair. "Every decision, every dollar, every visitor. We've been meticulous from day one." She reached for her laptop, as if ready to organize their defense right then, despite the exhaustion shadowing her eyes. Maribel squeezed her son's photo in her wallet, the worn edges testifying to how often she touched it. "Noah is safe at my sister's tonight. We follow every childcare regulation to the letter." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "They'll find nothing because there's nothing to find. My son is well cared for, well loved, and this house has given him stability, not taken it away." The clinic reopening announcement scared them more than we realized, Grace observed, her nurse's intuition cutting through to the heart of the matter. "We're changing too much too fast. Healthcare access threatens their whole system of control." She twisted her empty mug between her palms, her knuckles white with tension. "Then we keep going," Pastor Ruth said firmly, her voice carrying the weight of decades spent standing firm in difficult moments. "With truth, with records, with love as our foundation." She reached out, her weathered hand taking Maribel's on one side and Asha's on the other. "This is how communities have always survived, together." The circle completed itself naturally around the kitchen island. Grace's cool nurse's hands, then Elias's strong grip, then back to Maribel's steady warmth. Their shadows stretched across the kitchen floor, longer and somehow stronger than they had seemed individually. In the dim kitchen light, they stood united, their silence filled with unspoken promises. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, fresh attacks, more papers to file, and systems to navigate. But tonight they had each other, and they had the truth carefully documented in every binder, folder, and digital file. No more words were needed between them. The silence held their shared resolve, a pact stronger than any written contract. As the grandfather clock in, the hall chimed 1:30, marking both an ending and a beginning. Friday morning arrived with a gentle knock at 7:30. 2 CPS workers stood at the front door, their badges displayed professionally. Maribel welcomed them into the kitchen with calm dignity. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered, her hand steady as she pulled out her carefully organized folder of Noah's records. "Thank you, no," the senior worker replied. "We just need to review Noah's living situation and care arrangements." Maribel spread out the documents on the kitchen table. Noah's perfect attendance record, his honor roll certificates, vaccination records, and after-school program registrations. "Noah stays with my sister when I work late," she explained. "Here's her background check and childcare certification." Pastor Ruth arrived minutes later, bringing additional reference letters from the church's youth program leaders and Noah's Sunday school teachers. "Noah is one of our brightest helpers," she said warmly. "He especially shines during our community service projects." The CPS workers took careful notes, photographed the documents, and toured Noah's home workspace in the East Wing. They seemed particularly impressed by the organized study schedule and healthy snack protocols. "We'll file our report today," the senior worker said as they prepared to leave. "Everything appears to be in order." At 9 o'clock, Asha sat at her desk, facing her immigration attorney on the laptop screen. They methodically reviewed her documentation: her valid student visa, work authorization, academic transcripts, and the church program's official sponsorship papers. "They're trying to intimidate you," her attorney said firmly. "But your status is solid. Let's prepare a preemptive response." They spent the next hour assembling a detailed portfolio: pay stubs showing proper tax withholding, letters from her professors about her research on ethical business practices, and statements from Pastor Ruth about the program's community impact. Grace tackled her professional challenge at 10:30, sitting at the kitchen island with a stack of papers. Her fingers flew across her laptop keyboard as she composed her response to the nursing board. Former colleagues had rallied overnight, sending glowing letters about her years in oncology. "Remember the Thompson case?" One letter read, "Grace stayed 4 hours past her shift to help that family navigate end-of-life decisions. Her compassion never compromised her professional judgment." She attached documentation showing that all her activities at the mansion were within non-medical community support guidelines. Pastor Ruth added a statement clarifying that Grace provided only basic first aid and health education, nothing requiring a nursing license. The mansion's quiet rhythm was interrupted at noon when Elias's phone rang. The company's legal team requested an immediate video call. "The board is concerned about liability," the lead counsel explained, his face grave on the screen. "We strongly advise severing ties with these community activities." Elias sat straight in his office chair. "No," he said simply. "These women have done nothing wrong. They're implementing my grandmother's vision exactly as she intended." "Mr. Hart, please be reasonable." "I am being reasonable," Elias cut in. "I'm honoring contracts, correcting wage violations, and serving our community. That's not just reasonable, it's right." The afternoon brought harder news. At 2 o'clock, Elias received another call, this time from the board secretary. Victor had called an emergency session. The vote was quick and decisive. Elias was removed as active CEO, though they cushioned it with words like temporary and sabbatical. He sat in his office afterward, looking at his grandmother's photo. The others found him there, still and thoughtful rather than defeated. "They think they've won," he said quietly. "But they've just proved why this work matters." By 4 o'clock, they had made a difficult but unified decision. Maribel crafted a simple sign for the East Wing door. "Back soon. Truth takes time." They paused the community programs, not in surrender, but in strategic regrouping. "We document everything," Asha said firmly. "Every allegation, every response, every piece of evidence that shows we're doing good legal work." The day's wait settled around them as evening approached. At 6 o'clock, they gathered around the kitchen table, where Grace had laid out a simple meal of bread, soup, and fruit. Pastor Ruth joined them, bringing an extra loaf of homemade bread. Without fanfare, they joined hands. The prayer was gentle, non-denominational, more about shared hope than specific beliefs. "Grant us wisdom," Pastor Ruth said softly. "Grant us courage for the facing of this hour. Help us serve our neighbors with truth and love." They ate quietly, passing bread and sharing gentle smiles. The kitchen's warmth held them together as darkness fell outside. Maribel showed them a text from Noah, a photo of his finished homework, and a row of heart emojis. "We're doing right," Grace said, squeezing Maribel's hand. "That's what matters." By 9:45, exhaustion won out over anxiety. They headed to their rooms, knowing tomorrow would require clear heads and steady hearts. The mansion settled into silence. Halls darkened, except for the soft glow of security lights. Saturday morning arrived with a pale sun and determined spirits. By 8 o'clock, the mansion's kitchen hummed with quiet purpose as Pastor Ruth spread papers across the island counter. "A town hall," she said, tapping the lawn diagram she'd sketched. "Tomorrow evening. Open air, orderly, truthful. Let the community see exactly who we are and what we're doing." Maribel nodded as she filled thermoses with fresh coffee. "Transparency is our best defense." They divided into teams, each with clear tasks. Asha set up a documentation station in the East Wing, carefully organizing evidence into clear categories. File boxes lined the tables, employment records, program schedules, attendance logs, and donation inventories. Throughout the morning, a steady stream of supporters arrived. 3 janitors from the office towers brought pay stubs in manila envelopes, their faces determined as they shared their stories with Asha. $6 an hour, one woman said quietly, pointing to the numbers. "Through the shell company. But they told us not to complain, or we'd lose everything." Grace welcomed former clinic patients who came to give statements. A grandmother described how the clinic had caught her grandson's early diabetes. A young mother told of prenatal care that saved her baby's life. Each testimony was recorded, dated, and witnessed. By noon, volunteers arrived with sign-in sheets and photos from homework clubs and community suppers. Pastor Ruth's youth group members created poster boards showing the weekly schedule of activities, while others organized receipts from donation drives. Noah sat at his usual homework table, now converted to an art station. His tongue stuck out in concentration as he worked on a large poster. The finished product, in careful block letters surrounded by drawn hearts and stars, read, "We're not a scandal. We're a family." Elias paused when he saw it, resting his hand briefly on Noah's shoulder. "That's perfect," he said softly. "That's exactly what we are." At 3 o'clock, Elias met with James Morton, his trust attorney, in the Home Office. The older man spread legal documents across the desk, while Elias explained his plan. "The People First Trust," Elias said, pointing to the key provisions. "I want to transfer 51% of my personal voting shares. The mandate must be ironclad. Living wages for all workers, including subcontractors. Annual public audits. Permanent funding for both the clinic and the community hub." James adjusted his reading glasses. "This is bold, Elias. Once executed, it can't be undone. The board won't be able to touch these requirements without public proceedings." "That's exactly what I want." Elias's voice was firm. "My grandmother built this fortune on caring for people. I won't let it become just another soulless corporation." The attorney nodded, making final notations. "I'll file first thing Monday morning, but we can announce it tomorrow at the town hall, with me present to verify the legal framework." As afternoon shifted to evening, the mansion grounds transformed. Volunteers strung white lights between the trees leading to the lawn. Maribel and Grace arranged folding chairs in neat rows, while Asha tested the sound system. At 6:30, they gathered for a final run-through. Pastor Ruth stood at the microphone, checking sound levels as she reviewed the order of speakers. Community members would speak first, clinic patients, students from the homework club, workers with wage documentation. Then Elias would announce the trust, with his attorney present to explain the legal protections. "Remember," Pastor Ruth said, "we're not here to attack anyone. We're here to show the truth of who we are and what we're building together." They practiced transitions between speakers, adjusted microphone heights, and confirmed the placement of document displays. Noah insisted on hanging his poster center stage. By 9 o'clock, exhaustion settled over the group. They'd created a schedule for night watch shifts. No one wanted another surprise search or late-night disruption. Maribel took first watch with 2 church volunteers, while others settled into guest rooms or headed home for a few hours' rest. Elias walked the grounds one last time, checking security lights and locks. The string lights cast a gentle glow over the lawns where tomorrow's truth would be told. In the soft illumination, he could see Noah's poster swaying slightly in the evening breeze. "We're not a scandal, we're a family." The night passed in quiet rotation of watchful eyes. When dawn arrived, it came as promised, soft and clear, a gentle beginning to a pivotal day. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mansion's lawn as people began arriving in small groups. Some carried folding chairs, others brought blankets to spread on the grass. By 5 o'clock, nearly 200 neighbors filled the space beneath the string lights, their quiet conversations creating a gentle hum. Pastor Ruth approached the microphone stand, her warm presence immediately drawing everyone's attention. "Welcome, friends and neighbors," she began, her voice steady and clear. "We're here tonight because truth matters, because community matters, and because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can grow into something bigger than ourselves." She gestured to the evidence tables, where neat stacks of documents lay organized and labeled. "Tonight, you'll hear directly from your neighbors, their experiences, their struggles, and their hopes. We ask only that you listen with open hearts." Elias stepped forward briefly, but instead of speaking, he simply nodded and moved aside, making way for the first community speaker. A dishwasher from one of the office towers approached the microphone, his hands shaking slightly as he held up a piece of paper. "This is my first legal paycheck," he said, voice trembling but growing stronger. "After 6 years of being paid under the table, less than minimum wage, through shell companies. When Mr. Hart ordered the audit, I was scared to come forward. But look." He held the check higher. "This is what dignity looks like. This is what my children deserve." A janitor named Maria followed, her gray hair neat under a worn baseball cap. $3.50 per hour, she stated firmly. "That's what the shell company paid us, while charging the full contract rate. We have the proof right here." She gestured to a thick folder of pay stubs and contracts. "No more hiding." Several clinic patients spoke next. An elderly man with a cane described how the clinic had caught his heart condition early. "Nurse Grace," he said, turning to where she stood. "You saved my life by noticing something wasn't right that day. This clinic needs to stay open." Asha stepped up to the microphone, her spine straight despite her obvious nervousness. "My student visa was flagged for review after anonymous complaints," she said clearly. "But here are the facts. Every document properly filed, every hour logged, every requirement met." She held up a blue folder. "I won't be silenced by fear. The truth is right here in black and white." The crowd burst into applause, several people standing to show their support. Asha's shoulders relaxed slightly as she saw their encouragement. Maribel took the microphone next, Noah standing proudly beside her. "The community hub operated with full transparency," she explained, pointing to the display boards. "Every donation logged, every visitor signed in, every activity documented. We created a safe space for homework help, job training, and community meals. The records are all here." Then Elias returned to the microphone, his attorney James Morton beside him with a leather briefcase. "We've uncovered something significant," Elias announced, his voice firm. "The anonymous tips that triggered the investigation? They were orchestrated by Clearwater Crisis Management, a PR firm hired by Victor Lang." A murmur ran through the crowd as Elias continued. "The audit team discovered emails between Victor and Clearwater's CEO, planning what they called a strategic disruption to shut down our community work." He nodded to his attorney, who began distributing copies of emails to the police detectives present in the crowd. But there's more. Elias continued. As of tomorrow morning, when business opens, the People First Trust will be officially filed. He gestured to James Morton, who held up the legal documents. This trust will hold 51% of voting shares, with binding mandates for living wages, public audits, and permanent funding for both the clinic and community hub. The board cannot override these requirements. A movement at the edge of the crowd drew attention. Victor Lang stood there, his usually impeccable suit slightly rumpled. "This is ridiculous!" he called out. "You can't possibly." His words cut off as the projector flickered to life, displaying his own emails to Clearwater Crisis Management on the side of the mansion. The time stamps and signature lines were clearly visible. Two detectives who had been quietly observing stepped forward, one holding the folder of evidence James had provided. "Mr. Lang," the senior detective said firmly, "we'll need you to come with us to answer some questions about wage theft and corporate fraud." As Victor was led away, someone in the crowd began to sing. The melody of "Amazing Grace" rose soft and clear in the evening air. Others joined in, voice by voice, until the hymn filled the space between the trees. The string lights flickered on in the growing dusk, creating a gentle glow over the gathered community. Noah tugged at Elias's sleeve and pointed to his poster, still hanging center stage. "We're not a scandal, we're a family." In the warm light, surrounded by singing neighbors, those words had never felt more true. Monday morning dawned bright and crisp. At exactly 9 o'clock, James Morton strode into the county clerk's office with the trust documents, emerging 30 minutes later with officially stamped papers. By 10:30, reporters gathered outside the company headquarters as the board released its statement. Victor Lang has been suspended pending investigation into allegations of wage theft and corporate misconduct. The news rippled through the community. At 11:45, Elias received the first text from the audit team. "Back pay calculations complete for Building Services Group 1, ready to issue checks." Throughout that first week, more developments unfolded like dominoes falling into place. Tuesday afternoon, the first batch of back pay checks went out, some for thousands of dollars in missing wages. Maria, the janitor who had spoken at the gathering, wept when she opened hers. "My daughter can take her art classes now," she whispered, clutching the envelope. Wednesday morning brought more good news. Asha's phone lit up with an email from Immigration Services. "Visa status review concluded. No irregularities found." She read it aloud in the kitchen, her voice trembling with relief. Grace hugged her tight while Maribel whooped with joy. Thursday saw Grace back in scrubs, working her first shift at the reopened clinic. She moved through the familiar rooms with purpose, checking supplies and greeting returning patients. "Welcome home," she told each one, meaning it more deeply than they knew. By Friday afternoon, the Child Protective Services caseworker delivered her final report in person. "File closed," she announced, smiling at Maribel, "with commendations for providing an enriching environment for Noah." The paper bore an official stamp. Case resolved, positive outcome. The second week brought structure to their victories. Monday morning, the hub reopened with expanded hours, breakfast program at 7, homework club until 6, job training on weekends. The sign-in desk now had a proper computer, though they kept the handwritten guest book too. Tuesday, the board announced Patricia Chen as the new CEO, a veteran non-profit executive known for ethical leadership. She visited the mansion that afternoon, sitting with Elias in his new role as executive steward. "The trust's mandates are clear," she said, reviewing the documents. "People first, always." The days flowed together in a rhythm of purpose. Workers received their back pay. The clinic schedule filled with appointments. The hub hummed with activity. Seniors teaching teens to garden, Mothers swapping job leads, kids sprawled on the floor with homework and hope. By the third Sunday, the mansion gathered for a simple dedication. Noah's crayon poster. "We're not a scandal. We're a family." Hung freshly framed in the foyer, its childish letters somehow more profound than any corporate mission statement. Pastor Ruth offered a brief blessing. "May this house," she said, "always be a light in the darkness, a shelter in the storm, a place where dignity dwells and hope finds a home." As evening settled in, the East Wing filled with the warm chaos of Sunday supper. Folding tables groaned under casseroles and salads. The room buzzed with conversation, clinic patients chatting with janitors, tutoring volunteers trading stories with parents, Grace discussing garden plans with the seniors who'd started a vegetable plot. Elias moved through it all, passing dishes, refilling water glasses, at ease in this new version of his life. He paused by the window, watching the Atlantic waves catch the last light. Maribel appeared beside him, a knowing smile on her face. "Remember that first morning?" she asked, nudging his arm. "When we showed up and asked if you could handle us all?" He laughed, really laughed, the sound mixing with the happy din around them. "Together, yes," he answered, and it wasn't just a response. It was a truth they'd all built, brick by brick and day by day. Outside, dusk painted the sky in gentle purples. Through every window of the mansion, warm light spilled onto the lawn, not the cold gleam of empty wealth, but the golden glow of life being lived, of community taking root, of a house that had finally become a home for many. Noah darted past, now wearing his own small apron with "Junior Line Cook" embroidered on the pocket. "Grace needs more napkins," he called importantly, heading for the supply closet that bore his own carefully printed labels. Pastor Ruth's guitar strummed softly in the corner where a group had gathered to sing. The music drifted through the rooms like a blessing, wrapping around them all, the helpers and the helped, the healers and the healing, the teachers and the taught, all of them family now, all of them home.